Corey Robinson, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thanks, Will. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on the show today.
Corey, the timing of our interview is perfect. I just yesterday hosted a webinar on why and how to buy an existing franchise business. Your foray into buying businesses saw you buy 6 Batteries Plus locations. And in short order, you've grown your holdings to 12 plus 2 more under LOI, as I understand it.
That's correct.
So really great story of buying your way in and then continuing to scale through a programmatic acquisition strategy. But you've also now bought an independent business or independent businesses. So we'll have the opportunity here to contrast working within and outside a franchise system. So lots to cover. Let's get into it. Corey, please start us off with some background on you.
Yeah, so Corey Robinson. I grew up in LA, or just outside of LA. Spent the first 17 years of my life there. Moved to the Midwest to go to school, follow my dad out here. My dad and my stepmom moved in the mid-90s to the Midwest to be closer to her family and get out of the rat race that is California. So I've been in the area, so Western Illinois, Eastern Iowa since 2001. Married, 4 kids, worked at a few different roles in corporate America, and worked up my way through operations, operational excellence, some continuous improvement stuff, safety and risk management. It's kind of where I ended my career. Kind of a long-time real estate investor, kind of got into that as my career grew, right? And I had discretionary income. I was trying to find a place to put that money. Started getting into real estate investing, and that's kind of led me to this path today where I'm acquiring businesses.
Okay. So let's understand a little bit how your entrepreneurial kind of progression. So you were in corporate when you started buying real estate on the side?
Correct. Yeah, I was an executive for a food distribution company. So I was making really good money. So was my wife. We just realized that the rat race, we were never going to get to where we wanted to be real quick. And, we had some friends that were in real estate and just started looking at that as a possible opportunity to grow our wealth and maybe give us a little bit more freedom. We knew it wasn't going to be a quick thing, but we figured, we were going to start now rather than kind of putting all of our chips in the stock market.
Okay. And how much of a portfolio did you amass?
Yeah. So over 3 years, I think we started in 2018 and kind of stopped towards the end of COVID. We bought a little over 40, I think 42 or 43 properties. Today we're sitting just short of 140 doors is what our current portfolio is. We've sold a few off over the past year or so, as the climate has kind of shifted in the real estate game. But really most of our stuff is just kind of a long-term hold type of play. So
140-ish units, you said?
Yep.
Or doors?
Yeah.
And are those, some of that's got to be multifamily. That can't be 140 houses.
Correct. Yeah. So we've got anything from, I think we have 16 or 17 single families up to 38 unit apartment complex. So
great. And even with holdings like that, it wasn't enough to devote yourself to basically managing your portfolio and growing your real estate portfolio more and quitting your W-2?
No. The cash flow, let's, push off of that. If you take that, $100 a door per month, it just didn't add up to, and I have a partner, pretty much a 50% partner on everything. And then if you looked at, our incomes prior to all of this, making up, $250,000, $300,000 a year in W-2 income, just really didn't make sense. I didn't want to take a step back, on our standard of living. We had a pretty comfortable life, and the thought of kind of regressing to go off and manage tenants just didn't seem like the right move for me. And that's kind of why we pivoted into small business.
Okay. Well, that's actually a good, for people who don't know real estate very well, that's a good rule of thumb. So basically $100 of cash flow per month per door. So if you have 140 doors, that's $14,000 a month in cash flow, and which is what, $160,000, $70,000 a year. Yep. Now, of course, you're building equity. When all of those are paid for, you will have a fortune. So there is that. Yes. But to get to $250,000 a year of cash flow from your real estate holdings takes, probably what's the math on that? Just another probably into 250 units.
We figured doors. If we could get to 300, we could make an exit. But the landscape changed so much post COVID that and interest rates started to creep up. It just made it really hard to to find deals that cash flowed at all, let alone cash flowed what we needed them to.
Yeah.
So everything has kind of switched into more of that, appreciation play and the debt pay down play and the tax advantages that we get from having it. So
good, important points. It's not just about the cash flow per door. Okay, Corey. And so how old are you at this point in the story?
When we started buying real estate, I was 36.
Okay.
35.
35. So you bought
Yep.
real estate for 3 years, you said, I think.
Yep.
So you were 38. And then what happened? Why did you buy a business or learn about buying a business? Give us granular detail on that, how that evolved.
Yeah, so there's a couple of reasons, right? As we were looking at different asset classes and realizing real estate really wasn't going to be kind of the end all be all that we hoped it was going to be, started looking at different avenues. And through kind of my real estate progression and, growing and evolving as an entrepreneur, I started to get involved in a couple of different masterminds. And in those masterminds, kind of, everybody's doing something a little bit different. Everybody's kind of into real estate, but everybody's coming into real estate from a different perspective and a different, career profession or different entrepreneurial journey. And the whole real estate investor community really started to talk about different aspects or different asset classes. And as I started to hear about small businesses, that's what really piqued my interest. I looked back at like my career and thought, I've really gained all of these fantastic skills through the past 20 years or 2 decades of working. And I thought, man, I could really kind of put these in play and utilize them to do something, for myself and continue to kind of grow my portfolio. And so that, that conversation just continued on. And then I went down the path that I think that most of your listeners do, and started to read things like Buy Then Build, and started to listen to podcasts like yours and realized like, hey, this is a real avenue that I could chase. And so, I kind of started to work through refining my buy box and figuring out what I wanted to do. And that kind of led me, into writing a couple of LOIs early on that didn't go anywhere, but it was like great to go through the process and have those conversations. And then, I'd say a little bit, 6 months or so into that journey, I just really started to really narrow the scope and realize I'm still working. It would be great to find something that I could buy, one that would offset my income, but two would kind of allow me to jump into business, not alone. Because just going from corporate America, which a lot of the skills would transition, but I knew I had the foresight then know not everything's going to transition, not all of my skill sets going to fit a small business situation. And so that's, I started to kind of refine that and understand hey, franchising is the way to go. So that's really how I ended up targeting franchises and exiting my W-2.
Okay. But your understanding of the opportunity of buying businesses, of course, the napkin math is way more compelling than buying real estate, but it usually means becoming the owner-operator. And
Correct.
Yes, there's exceptions. I feature them of people who retain their W-2 while buying a business because they immediately hire an operator. Those are the exceptions, though, not the rule. So when you entertained this asset class, you envisioned having operators and keeping your corporate job, or leaving your corporate job once and for all and becoming the operator?
Yeah, initially I envisioned that what I would utilize the business cash flow for would be to buy more real estate. So I had the kind of the foresight and the expectation of going into SMB and acquiring a business as an investor, not as the operator. And that was from day one, that was always my intent. And then it quickly evolved into I have too much on my plate. This is a little bit more, even though I had an operator on my first acquisition, I realized this is a little bit more than I thought it was going to be. I felt like I was kind of doing a disservice to my family and to actually my W-2 to my career, because I just wasn't as present as I should have been and feel like they were getting everything out of me that they should. And the same thing on the home front. And that's really what kind of evolved that situation into deciding hey, this is going to be a full-time gig and I'm going to exit my W-2 and go into SMB acquisitions kind of full-time.
So those that slug of batteries plus locations that you bought in one go, those 6 had an operator, and you were in your W-2 on the other side of that transaction. Then you chose
Correct.
to leave your W-2, but immediately after you bought those, you were still employed.
Yeah, for about 6 months.
For 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay. Some franchise systems, franchisors will actually market the possibility of you, franchisee, not having to work in the business and maybe even keeping your job? I'm not so versed in different franchise system marketing to know how true that is or how common that is, but I think it does happen. That the promise can be, this is an arm's length. This is more of an investment than you becoming a small business operator. Was Batteries Plus like that?
Yeah, very much so. They really they're really looking, I would say their strategy is they do have like 1 and 2 store operators coming in, but I think that they put a lot of energy into the multi-store operators because they really want the operators to be, or the owners to be more of a brand ambassador, to be thinking more strategically. I think that they see the value of the owner kind of having a different perspective on the business than, somebody that's in the business every day operating it as a store manager. It's really hard, I think, as a store manager, as the owner and the store manager and running the day-to-day, to kind of take a step back and think about how you're going to help grow this business and how you're going to partner with the corporation on, evolving the business in the future. And so I think Batteries Plus is kind of taking the stance that, we want our operators and our owners to kind of be a level above the store so they can really think about, the next moves and really add value to the company as a whole rather than, being so focused in the operations.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, and it's one of the things that came up in the webinar yesterday. Connor Gross was the host of that webinar. And Connor talked about when you do your franchise brand selection and you're evaluating a brand from the perspective of somebody who wants to buy in and then buy multiple. Certain franchise brands just want their franchisees to be owner operators, and then others don't. So there's a spectrum. Sounds like, and of course, for this audience, you're going to want to target those like Batteries Plus, where they want strategic, acquisition-minded, aggressive, hungry, ambitious type owners. Yeah. So great. And Corey, before I want to spend more time on your selection of this business and this franchise brand, but before we do, you thought your 2 decades of corporate there would be some translation of those skills, some transfer of those skills into small business ownership, small business investing. Specifically, what skills did you think were going to be relevant here? Because they are very different contexts.
Yeah, so I think that the things that I thought would transition well are the things that did transition pretty well. So, being an executive in a big corporation, my focus was mostly on leadership development and strategy, right? No matter what your function is, you can be in finance, you can be in operations, you can be in HR. The higher up the chain you go, the less that you're really involved in the day-to-day, as you know well. And it's like the mindset really comes, how do we develop our staff and how do we create a path forward to get to where we want to go? And so I thought that those skills would be the ones that would really transition well. And as I found out, as I transitioned, got more involved in the business, I found that those things really did work well because most small business owners, traditionally, I don't want to say that they're not bad leaders, but most of them have been in that space, their whole life. And I come from an area where I'm constantly growing, constantly learning different leadership skills, constantly learning different ways to make the business move forward, using different tools, creating different systems. And so all of that, I think that transitioned very well. The things that didn't transition well were the things, managing from a financial statement. That's what I'm accustomed to, right? The money's always there. And, I'm focused on cost and sales, or budgeting. And it's like, all of that stuff was the stuff that's like, I know how to read a P&L. Like I know how to manage to a P&L. I know how to manage to a balance sheet. I got this. What I had a hard time figuring out was the cash flow piece, right? Because it's like, like we're making money this month, like no big deal. Like we can go spend, we can do this, we can do that. And what ended happening, shortly after I bought the business, I wanted to make all these improvements. I wanted to invest this money into the business that I just bought. Well, we hit a really slow patch, slow time of year, like February, March, when it's real cold. The real cold season is over, and there's kind of a lull in the business. And so that, our revenue drops by 30-40% during those times. Well, I was out spending money, that I probably shouldn't have been, and just tanked the cash flow and put myself in a relatively difficult spot. And I was really fortunate that I had my W-2 and had a really good income because it allowed me kind of weather that storm and learn that lesson. But it was like, those were the things that did not transition at all, because it was like, most of the executives, most of the managers and corporate, the money's always there. Like you don't have to ever really worry about the money. In small business, when you're the owner, that is that's the life, you know what I mean? That's the life force of the business. And that was a hard transition and a hard lesson to learn. But everything else, I felt like, especially the leadership side, I mean, developing my staff, aligning them on a common goal, creating framework around the different systems we wanted to use. All of that stuff showed up really well in our business, and it continues to show up well in my Batteries Plus business, because we're doing really well. I feel like our staff is really aligned and understands our goals, and we continue to march towards them. And so I think that's something that I was able to bring to the table that I won't say most, but a lot of small business operators just don't not really understand.
I want to hear about the deal and how you found it and your search and so on first. But I also want to share with the audience that what was the award within the Batteries Plus system that you received?
It's the MVP, like the franchisee of the year for 2023. Yeah.
Okay, right. And so I embarrass you by telling the audience that, Corey, or maybe not, maybe you like it, because I just want people to understand they're listening to somebody who really is excelling at this, and there's a lot to learn from you. Okay, great. So to your search, you decide that though you have a lot of confidence in the transfer of these skills that you've spent 20 years building in corporate, you first time as being kind of an entrepreneur or small business owner. And so working within the system, within a system, with frameworks and playbooks appealed to you. So you decided from there that you were going to do a franchise, or buy into a franchise system. And why buy a business as opposed to start? Because frankly, often in franchise land, the franchisors are often trying to sell you on de novo, stand up a new location, start a new territory. But you were already coming at this from, no, I'm going to buy an existing business where business is.
Yeah. So there's lots of reasons I think that went into that decision. One, I was still working, and my original plan was to continue to work. Not only that, I worked in the risk management, risk engineering field. And so I'm always analyzing things from that perspective. What is the least risk that I can acceptably take on? And then like, not only that, the community I had around me, listening to the people on your podcast and reading the books and talking to my network, you just realize, one, statistically, how many businesses are transferring hands or should be transferring hands, and that, that transfer of wealth that's happening or not happening in many instances. And so the opportunity, it just didn't make sense from my perspective to go in and put all of this work and effort into trying to grow something from scratch when I could just go out and buy it. Because my intent was always to kind of be that investor. And if I was going to have to go and grind, 60, 70 hours a week, it kind of took away from everything else that I was doing, and took away from, my values in life. I wanted to be home more. I wanted to focus more on my family. I wanted to focus more on my health. I wanted to spend more time with my friends. And I wasn't going to be able to do that if I had started from scratch. So it just really didn't make sense to me. And I knew like what is going on in the small business world. It's not exclusive to independent companies, right? I mean, it is, a lot of these brands are going through the same thing. And I had a couple of guys that were in franchises that, kind of explain that, like there are people looking to exit, and there are people helping these franchisees exit. So it might be a little bit easier because you actually get somebody on the other side that knows what they're doing, trying to help you kind of get this acquisition done. And in terms of like the franchise development group for these different franchises, because they kind of lay out the terms and kind of help move the process along. So from that, it just made a ton of sense. Yeah, starting one up just never crossed my mind.
Very interesting. And so let me just repeat basically what you've said. Two key things, because there will be a lot of people listening to this who entertain buying a business and keeping their W-2, and as perilous as that can be, it does in fact sound like it's more realistic if you buy a franchise. Although you decided that you did want to leave your W-2. So we'll get to that point in the story. And further, I mean, if you think about buying a small business almost more as an investor, if you feel like that label suits you better than entrepreneur or operator, it does feel like a franchise system could be, that a lot of the risk is mitigated. I mean, there's a lot already there that you're getting for your franchise fee. Point one. Point two is just how this dynamic, the silver tsunami, let's call it, exists not only in independent businesses, but in these legacy franchise brands. A lot of the owners are themselves looking to offload their portfolios. It's happening there as well, and lots of good opportunities. And of course, you have people like Brian Beers that I know you know. He's been on the podcast, who pitches this as this specifically, identifying a legacy brand. And in his case, it was Midas, the auto body. I guess it's an auto body chain.
Auto repair. Yep.
Auto repair. Excuse me. Auto repair. And he's he knows that franchise system well, and he's rolled up dozens of locations from retiring owners in the Philadelphia area. And he thinks that's a playbook that can be followed in a number of legacy systems. So Silver Tsunami, both within and without franchise systems. Great. Thanks, Corey. So, okay. What does your search look like, the actual mechanics, once you've dialed in this buy box? And by the way, also, what size are you looking for in terms of SDE? What does your balance sheet look like? How much equity can you put toward this project?
Yeah. So, I guess I'll start with the equity piece. I had a couple $100,000 that I could move around, knowing, I kind of knew the SBA guidelines. I'd done a lot of research on that and talked to a lot of people about that. So I kind of knew where I was at. And I knew that I needed something like in the 500,000 to 600,000 SDE range. The thing about most franchise shops, like not a McDonald's or stuff like that, but that are higher volume revenue. But most of, places like Batteries Plus, Midas, those home services or those auto repair shops, like they don't churn. One location doesn't churn, $300,000 or $400,000 in SDE unless you're very fortunate. Usually you're looking, 80 to 120,000 a year off of one location SDE. So I knew that I needed to get to 500,000-600,000 by the time I covered my debt service to get to a point where I was making enough income to at least come close to replacing what I was making. So that's really, what I looked for. As far as the search went, I kind of went all in. I talked to a lot of people. I'm very fortunate to have a large network of entrepreneurs that are doing very similar things. So I started, biz buy sell. I started to talk to every broker that I could find. I created kind of a business profile with some financials and some information on there that made me seem like more of a legitimate investor. And I, contacted as many brokers as I could. I talked to local CPA firms, wealth management firms, a lot of the attorneys, in my area, just because, I know that I use them for different things and they would know who might be looking to exit the business, whether it be, today or whether it be, a couple of years from now. And so, I really filled that funnel pretty full. And my buy box was, I wanted something simple. Like I didn't want something like, elaborate. I didn't want a SaaS company. I didn't want anything like that. I wanted something that I could easily understand, that was resilient to, macroeconomic trends, and something close to home, and something obviously that was multi-unit. And so the Batteries Plus, really just kind of fit all of those boxes, and I was able to check all of those off, and it just made a lot of sense with that refined search.
And was it just sitting there on Biz Buy Sell?
It was listed with a broker that I had made. I didn't make contact with that broker, but I made contact with the broker that knew a broker that had just gotten it. So it did make it to Biz Buy Sell, but we had already been in contact before it actually hit the website.
Great. And so this 6-unit portfolio of Batteries Plus, what did it look like? What were the numbers around it?
So, correction, I guess on that. So the first purchase was 4, I bought two more right after that. So so it was doing it was 3.3 million. Top line, bottom line was just short of 500,000. So it was about, I think, 490 SDE.
Okay. So 490 SDE across 4 locations. So each one doing, call it 120, 125.
Yep.
In SDE.
Yep.
Great.
And that had the office manager and the operations manager as part of that package as well. So I had the operator and the administrator kind of as part of that deal.
So I assume that this was really marketed. Of course, a lot of listings on Biz Buy Sell and by brokers are marketed this way as, just buy this. This is an investment. You don't need to get involved, runs itself. I mean, was that kind of the language on the sim?
It wasn't actually. It was not a, this is just a passive investment type of marketing ploy. The old owners were, I would say, relatively involved. And I've remained relatively involved up until late They were doing some of the HR stuff, some of the hiring. They were still doing some of the backup filing, sales tax and stuff like that. So and some of that stuff I found out later, but they did have a kind of a day-to-day involvement still. I would say it was limited, but they were still there. So
okay. So it was one of these classic kind of, they had operators at the locations to keep the businesses functioning, the trains running on time, but the back office, they took a lot of the back office on were handling themselves. And do you have any sense of how many hours a week cumulatively between there was a husband and wife?
No, it's just two investors actually. A man and a woman that were friends. They're real estate investors together, and they bought this to increase cash flow. And they both said they were working 15, 20 hours a week in the business, which I found to be pretty accurate.
So for you, that would mean replacing 30 to 40 hours. So it would become a full-time thing for you if you didn't hire that away. Okay. And so you buy these 4 and quickly learn that you're going to need to find 30 or 40 hours in your week.
Correct. Yeah, I started doing a lot more than I thought that I was going to initially. I mean, I knew that there was going to be some level of work, and I thought that in talking to the leaders that were in the business that I could do a pretty good job of delegating that. But what I didn't anticipate through that was one, the understanding. I had to get to understand the business and the culture and the tasks that were being completed. And so that's really what took up a lot of time, because I was pretty good at going in and tearing everything down and delegating it out. But it just took time to really understand all of that stuff. And I think that's really where I started to get into the situation where I'm doing that in my real estate business. We kind of had internal property management, and I was kind of going through the processes and systems and trying to delegate all of that stuff out and get it off of my plate while trying to do the same thing in the Batteries Plus business while work. And so it's I only had limited bandwidth, and I was kind of not showing up everywhere in my life like I should have been. And so that's where, the thought was okay, I'm at a point where I could make a transition and make the jump and just, go on to the next acquisition. So that's really where I ended up, because it was just, I knew once I disseminated between what everybody was doing and what needed to be done, I could easily either hire somebody else, or most people are not day to day. Their plate is not full and their schedules are not optimized. And so it's I knew there was opportunity to give them more. And that's what I did. It just took time.
I see. Give more people who are your employees, give them more responsibilities.
Yeah.
So for those 6 months, you're kind of doing back office of your real estate portfolio, back office and learning your Batteries Plus businesses, and then doing your W-2, your corporate job, and your family. So it's a lot. So after 6 months, you decide, first of all, you decide that this isn't tenable. You're going to devote yourself fully now to being a small business owner, operator, investor, entrepreneur. And it must have been proven to you to take that leap that you had bought good businesses, that there was money to be made here. What did you find? Was it no surprises, no J curve, no? It was as advertised, $500,000 a year.
Yeah, no J curve, which I'm very thankful for. At the same time, I wish I would have learned that lesson maybe a little bit earlier in my journey. No, it's a very predictable business. If it's managed well, which this business was managed very well, it's pretty predictable. We know kind of what traffic is going to be from a retail perspective in and out of the stores. Our business-to-business customers are pretty reliable in what they order and when they order it. And all of that transitioned very well. It's just some of the small things that I assumed that people were doing, but found later that the owners were doing. And they were pretty minimal. But the one big thing that added up, I got into a little bit of a sales tax issue with the different states that I operate in, just because it was 6 months into it, it's wait, these aren't being filed. And I'm not really, the mail is being, going to different locations, going to the office for the business, and some's coming to a PO box here locally. And maybe I just kind of ignored it, but it was they kind of got me into a little bit of trouble there. But that was really, I would say the worst of it. And that was just, my ignorance on how the business ran and all of the regulatory things that I needed to be responsible for that I just didn't know. But outside of that, I was still to this day very happy with that acquisition. And that probably led to some arrogance, and some, feeling that I could go out and just continue to do this at scale really quickly, like we did with real estate, which, later in the story, we'll get into
good teaser.
How I learned my lesson. My lesson.
Tell us about Batteries Plus. There happens to be one close to me. I've driven by it and noticed it and said to myself, what is that? And then coincidentally meet you, but I was completely unfamiliar with this brand. So please tell us what Batteries Plus is all about.
Yeah, so Batteries Plus is a national retailer of all types of battery products from A to Z. So essentially, we do everything from a watch battery all the way up to semi-bus batteries and everything in between. And so I think a lot of our business is based off of kind of those niches. Like a lot of people come in looking for specialized batteries and then realize hey, they could buy everything through us. And we have trained, dedicated staff. I always look at it if you go into an Ace Hardware versus going into a Home Depot, you go into Ace Hardware, their staff is very knowledgeable, knows where everything is at, knows the applications really well. And our business is set up kind of the same way. They are, our retail associates are much more than just salespeople. They really have a lot of training, a lot of knowledge about the different products that we carry and how they apply, how they apply to the applications out in the field. In addition to that, we do device repair. So we work on iPhones, Samsungs, iPads, all of that stuff, replacing screens, replacing batteries. And we do, I would say, minimal work in the lighting space as well. And there's some other retail items that are in there. And we do exit signs and stuff like that. But about 90% of our business is really just made up of exactly batteries.
And I heard you mention B2B. So there's a B2B component here?
There is. Yeah, it's, you'd be surprised the amount of batteries that go into a place like a hospital or a warehouse. We got others like trailer manufacturers, or one of our biggest customers is the road signs. There's batteries powering all of those blinkers that are on those road signs, and they consume a ton of batteries. Municipalities consume a lot of batteries too. Pretty much everybody in every business does. And so that there's just a ton of volume. So yeah, the business has always kind of been semi-focused on the commercial or business to business aspect. I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, it's really turned towards focusing on growing that part of the business or that sector of the business, just because the opportunity is there. Historically, there's been other competitors in that space, but we kind of have a unique value proposition that we have these retail locations all over the country. So in many instances, if the facilities managers from a local hospital need something right now, they can send somebody over to one of our stores and pick whatever up underneath their commercial account, rather than having to place an order online and waiting a couple of days to get it. So it allows us to kind of wiggle our way into some of those doors and get some of those commercial accounts and have them, source all of their battery products right through us. So.
Well, let's lean on a couple of this. Let's Porter's 5 forces this, although I still don't have those committed to memory. But I just want to stress test some of the value proposition here, because it's fascinating to me. So these are stores, basically. These are retail environments. So you get retail traffic, consumer traffic, and then you've got this whole commercial line of business. So and by the way, what's the split roughly between commercial and retail? Or
we're about
consumer?
70-30.
70 commercial.
No, 70 retail.
Oh, 70 retail. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So for the retail piece, I'm surprised that, batteries seem just so well suited to be purchased online, because for example, if I think about a watch battery, those little flat disc looking batteries, right? I bought one of those for either a watch or my daughter's toys or whatever. And, it's got a little etching on the back of R-232 or whatever it is. And so I just promptly, I think the reflex of practically any consumer would be okay, I'm going to drop that right into Google. And then I'm going to see an ad that takes me to Amazon or wherever, and it's going to be at my doorstep tomorrow. So this seems like the retail piece of it seems like a very vulnerable, because batteries are such commodities. One battery is just as good as the next. So it's not something that I need to look and feel and touch before I buy it, which is kind of the types of retail products that have been protected more from Amazon. So anyway, address that. How is it that you continue to have such good walk-in traffic from consumers who are buying now everything on Amazon?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it was a really big concern of mine when I got into the business. And I would say from the perspective of like small batteries, like the watch batteries, your AA's, your AAA's, they're everywhere, right? You can go to Home Depot, you can go to Walmart, you can order them online. There's a million different avenues to get them. So we always look at those things as more like an add-on. Like, we'll definitely beat the price of anywhere else, and somebody's already in the store for something else. The value proposition for this business is really that batteries are deeply regulated. So a car battery, something to that, a lithium battery. There are a lot of regulations around the shipping of those products and the licensing that has to go into the shipping of those products. So it's not like UPS is just going to drop one at your house. And due to those DOT regulations, that's really what safeguards, I would say, the business against the e-commerce businesses and just getting things sent to your house. And not only that, the other part of it is this, a lot of people don't know the exact application. Like, it's pretty easy. Okay, I need a AA or I need a AAA for this device. But if you need a battery for your lawnmower, or your motorcycle, or even your car, like, that's a little bit more complicated search. And so going into the store is definitely more likely, especially amongst the older demographic. And not only that, you can't get it. Like, that's the other part. You can't have it shipped to your door and just go and install it in your car. You have to go to a retailer of some sort. So that's really been, that's what sold me. And that continues to hold true to this day. So.
Well, the other thing that interests me is that I would imagine, let's take a car battery, perfect example. Yours, Batteries Plus, is a very horizontal business. So you sell batteries into all different industries, categories, products. Whereas if I have a car battery problem, I'm likely to go to a vertically focused car retail place, I'm so bad with cars. Where do I go get my car parts?
Well, you can go to AutoZone. You could go to Midas, the Meineke. Any of those places. Yeah, absolutely.
So I feel like I would go to a place where I otherwise get my car issues addressed, or motorcycle issues addressed, or lawnmower issues addressed, so I'd go to a vertically focused place rather than a horizontally focused place. I think I have a car problem first. I don't think I have a battery problem first. Yep. Now, I might be beating this to death, and the answer is, well, some people do. They just think about batteries. They go to Batteries Plus. But do you, maybe any response to that?
No, I think the awareness about our offerings is the biggest challenge that the organization has, and they're very well aware of it. So educating our customer base is important, and making sure that our marketing and advertising really illustrates everything that we do is an important part of the business, and one of the focuses of the business as a whole, because it is a challenge, and it is, there's much better known competitors in the space. But I don't know, 60, 70% of the batteries we sell are car batteries. And not only that, you can come in and we install a car battery for you. So there's another value proposition that goes along with it. So you come in, order, buy the battery. Our associates will come and put it in for you. So, in what we see is a lot of returning customers, I think, is what happens. As we can get people in the store and understand what we do, there's just a ton of opportunity there. But the challenge is getting them into the store. And that's always been the challenge of the business.
Great. And then on the commercial side, you've already addressed it. One of the key value propositions is that if that hospital administrator needs a problem solved right now and pluck something off the shelf, they know that they can go to their local Batteries Plus. Because I would think it has the same vulnerability that I just described on the retail side about horizontal versus vertical. Hospitals have their distributor that provides everything to them, every possible thing, the thousands and thousands of products that hospitals need to function. And so I would have just thought that batteries would be among those thousands and thousands of products. So they essentially already have a supplier for their batteries. In your answer, I guess, is yes, they do, but in a squeeze, and they need it today, they need it this hour, they go to you.
Yeah, and I think what we're able to do, right, is especially the higher volume customers, is we offer better pricing and better service. And so that's where we beat out kind of these all-in-one supply houses that supply places like, these big factories or these hospitals. And so just because of the volume that we purchase as an organization, right, we can offer better prices. And we're fortunate because most people that are doing this type of ordering are in engineering and facilities and maintenance of some sort. And so we do a really good job of developing connections with those people, because they're typically the ones almost always that are purchasing from us. It's not really, there's no administrator, there's no person in procurement that's setting up these accounts usually. It is typically that facilities or maintenance director, manager that has these relationships and owns these relationships and just wants the accessibility that we offer And a lot of it is relational. Like our sales team is in there talking to these guys, getting them what they need, and making sure that they understand, that they can come into any of our stores and get the same pricing that they get when they order. And when I look at it from everybody's under the gun coming out of corporate, like everybody's under the gun always to meet budget or beat budget, reduce costs. And so for us, you order batteries through somebody like Granger or Fastenal or one of these other places, like their prices are going to be so much higher than what we can offer.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, despite my squeezing the value proposition here, Batteries Plus is in fact a legacy. It is a legacy franchise. It's 30 plus years old?
It is.
And continues to grow. Sounds
correct.
Like.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact number.
This is not a something that was, that's kind of declining. This is the demand for it and where it's positioned in the market seems as robust as ever.
Correct. Yeah. If you look back over the past couple of years, I think we've opened more stores in the past 3 years than like the 10 years prior to that. So there's been a lot of opportunity. There's been a lot of relationships that have been built with places like Department of Defense and other national retailers, national organizations. And there's just been a big push to continue to expand it. I mean, as we electrify the country, the need for battery power becomes greater and greater. And so, it's one of those things that's not really going away. And I think it's just ripe to continue to grow and offer an opportunity to people like me looking to jump into a simple business. Mm-hmm.
Well, you're quite the spokesman for the brand there, Corey, like the MVP franchisee should be.
Yes.
I would imagine one of the other appealing things here is that the technical prowess of your employees in your frontline workers or your technicians. Because I think one of the challenges to compare it to, contrast it to, let's say, quick service, where you're getting, people who are very low skilled, and there's a lot of turnover, and that is probably pain point number one on businesses like that. In your business, I imagine the retention is much, much higher because it's harder to get the job. It's a better job. It's intellectually stimulating, I imagine, for a lot of people. Anyway, I'm putting words in your mouth. What do you say there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it's on average, it probably pays a little bit better than most everyday retail associate type roles. And there are a lot of different avenues. There's a lot of different training. There's a lot of different opportunities because of the technical knowledge. And there's a lot of us as owners and managers of this business trying to retain those folks because it's not, I wouldn't say it's incredibly hard. It's not like getting a tradesman in there, but the learning curve is pretty steep, right? Because there's a lot of knowledge that needs to be retained for us to continue to show value with our business. And that's always going to be the challenge of this business. And so getting people from zero to where they're fully trained, I mean, it's a 6 or 8 month long process to get them, doing device repair is very technical, very tedious type work. And it's a very sensitive work. And so it takes some practice, it takes some time. And through that practice and that time, there's some costs associated with that, not only to training, but we break devices, we screw up or break a, $1,200 iPhone. I mean, that's on the business to take care of. And so those are added expenses to the business that we chalk up to kind of the learning process. So we do what we can to retain our employees. And I feel like a lot of them stick with us because it is kind of more of a techie type job. And there is a lot of continuing employee development that goes on in our business.
We've talked about how the franchisor is looking for franchisees who are ambitious, who want to have multiple units, who think strategically, which again, for this audience is the type of franchise brand that you want to buy into, type of franchisor you want to partner with. Were there any other characteristics of the franchise brand, Corey, of the brand and the franchisors, these people it is really a partnership, that you liked? So when I say brand, I don't mean Batteries Plus its value proposition. I mean the kind of culture of the people of the franchisor.
Yeah, so I'll take that and elaborate on it a little bit. So for those of you that don't understand franchising, most franchises roll up underneath kind of an umbrella or a parent company, where I don't want to name drop any of them, but they might have 6, 10, 12, 14 brands, right? And then they have a shared services type office, kind of like a holdco setup. where they service all these different brands across their portfolio with shared people. So one marketing professional might be focused on 4, 6, 8 brands, which was really a turnoff to me. It wasn't something that was like going to end my search or going to stop me from purchasing with one brand or another. But as I got into my search and started to realize like the value that those people brought to what I was trying to do, because I wanted the support, I wanted the knowledge, I wanted dedicated people I could go to help move the business in the direction that I wanted and help me understand. And as I talked to more and more franchises, the more and more I realized like, man, their team is broken up amongst all these different brands. And as somebody that had split focuses all the time, even operating at a very high level, but I had split focus all the time. I realized like I never gave everything as much as I should be giving it. And the thing that I really enjoyed and appreciated about Batteries Plus, while being owned by private equity, the leadership team has been fairly stable. Not only that, the shared services, the corporate team, they are dedicated 100% to Batteries Plus. From the CEO all the way down to, your customer support reps. Everybody is the Batteries Plus brand. And what I think that brings to the table is like alignment, right? These people are dedicated to building the brand, supporting the brand, and making the brand better. And for me, like that was a lot. That meant a lot to me because I knew like going into this, being fresh into this, I wanted those support people. I wanted to make those connections with people at the corporate office, so I could leverage that relationship, and we could learn from one another and continue to grow our partnership. Because that's how I view this. It is a partnership. Like I rely on them for a lot of information, for a lot of knowledge, and a lot of direction. And going to somebody that spends a quarter of their time focused on my brand just didn't seem to work. And I got the opportunity to meet the executive staff. They did have a lot of, I would say, turnover kind of as I was coming in. They had some new, executive leaders with new ideas. And for me, that was really big too. I like to keep things fresh. I like to keep things moving forward. And I feel like, corporations stagnate when the people at the top are there for too long, right? There should be some churn. There should be new ideas coming in. And I could see that through the business. Like there are new leaders coming into the business and they were trying new things. They weren't all working, they were piloting different programs, but at least they were looking to evolve. And for me, that meant a lot because I'm going into this long term. And I want a company that's looking to adapt, not their technology, their offerings, how they show up for their customers. And as I got to know the brand, as I got to know the team, I realized like they're really focused on growing and evolving the business. And, the things that we talked about earlier, like, this legacy brand that like, they peaked and they're just kind of slowly dying off. That wasn't the case here. And I seen that resonate, kind of in the corporate team.
Great, Corey. That was awesome. And just to kind of add a little more color to what you said about the shared services thing. So I think the classic brand that people will have heard of is Neighborly Private Equity.
It's one of them.
And then there's another one, Something Capital, and you hear about them commonly. And yeah, they own all these franchisors, these franchise brands, and so they're big private equity shop. And so yeah, I guess they have the shared services model. So you were worried that your digital marketing team at Batteries Plus might be working on 3 or 4 other brands. And so they're just less immersed in your brand, not thinking about your brand as much. But you found with Batteries Plus that while it is owned by private equity, the people are devoted just to all the specialists in the mothership are devoted just to your brand.
Correct.
Yeah. And that was appealing for you. Interesting criterion. It sounds like a good one to surface before you buy into a brand. Okay. One other big picture question here, Corey. Anything on your identity going from corporate guy to franchise guy? Was that no big deal or did it take an adjustment?
Yeah, it was, I'm glad you brought that up. It was a big adjustment. I, in my late 20s, decided to go back to school, worked on finishing my bachelor's, finishing my master's, and really rose through the ranks of corporate America really quickly. And I kind of hung my hat on that. I was really proud of kind of where I came from versus where I was, and the security that degree in that profession really offered me. And so I went through, through this whole period of buying the business until the time I quit. I think that was one of the biggest struggles and one of the reasons I kept both for as long as I did. I had the security of knowing like I had income coming in, but then I had like this profession that I was deeply immersed in and very deeply tied to. And I wouldn't even say it wasn't a profession or a job that I hated. Like I didn't hate it by any means. It was just on this journey that I was outgrowing, I guess, my profession. And it took a long time to realize how my identity or, how I seen myself was really holding me back. Because going from, high level employee with a career path that is well laid out, well established, and all the security that's associated with that, to going to the unknown, even though I was pretty successful, doing pretty well in the entrepreneurial space, it was scary to make the leap to go from, okay, like I know I can pay my bills tomorrow to I'm just kind of winging it and hoping that this all works out. And so that jump was, and I think it's for all entrepreneurs, it's a struggle. But for me, it's like, I didn't hate my career. I didn't hate my job. I was very vested in it. I was very vested in the business that I worked for. And leaving the business and leaving all of that behind was a big deal. Not only for me, but I think for my family as well. Cause it's like, you go from, we have a really great life that's supported by the income of my secure profession to, the unknown and the roller coaster. Yeah. I mean, it's been a roller coaster since then. So but
correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I also heard that the status that the corporate identity conferred on you was also something you had to learn to let go, because that probably a lot of people feel like that. It does feel like a little more statusy to be well positioned within a big, corporate environment versus a guy out here running a franchise or even 4 franchises or 12 franchises. Those of us who are entrepreneurs know that, of course, we respect the small business owner more, or we like the status in our mind is higher of the small business owner entrepreneur. But society largely, there's probably frankly just more status in the court with the corporate identity. And you in particular, we didn't go into it today, but I know from our pre-call that you had a rough upbringing and a rough time in your 20s. And as you just finished telling us, you went back and got your degrees in your late 20s. So the status that you found yourself with was harder won than others, and you got it really fast. You ran after it in your late 20s. So you were probably clinging to it more than a lot of people, and a lot of people do cling to it. So is that all accurate or no?
It is. No, I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah. Cause I think, we're conditioned to think that way, think that success is, this W-2 path and, getting to the kind of the top of the hill within a big corporation and having that security. And I think for me, like tying that back to my childhood and all the insecurities related to that rough upbringing, not having anything, and then kind of building something for myself, having that security made it a lot harder because it was, I never wanted to go back to that situation that I was in. And I always looked at like, I was conditioned to believe like this is what success was. Fortunately, like, I had started the journey of growth and development long before all of this and realized like, hey, being tied to this title isn't everything, but there's still a lot of processing that had to go in to get to the point where it's like, okay, like I'm okay giving this up and moving on to the next thing. But yeah, it's
okay. So let's hear broader context here is so-called programmatic acquisition. Franchises make that really easy. So one of the promises is if you're acquisition minded, you're in a system and then buying more units or territories of that system, the integration is super light because they're already all using the same systems. Everything is already familiar to you, the playbooks, the processes, et cetera. So I basically want to hear if that's true. So, and let's do that by hearing how your first acquisition or two after you bought the 4, what did that look like? So tell us about the first, I guess, store number 5 that you bought. Unless you bought 5 and 6 together, were they a pair?
They were right, one after another, but they were separate. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about 5 and then maybe 6. And is it true what they say?
So yes, it is somewhat true what they say. I guess I'll lead with that. The systems, the processes, once you understand that, the playbook is well established. And so going in and instituting the playbook is pretty easy. The things that they don't tell you is, you have to then create alignment and integration into your company culture and the way that you run your business. They provide the systems, but that doesn't mean that that's how your business is ran, right? And so understanding how your company culture and the processes you follow and what you focus in on, how that's going to integrate into other businesses, that's the challenge. But it makes it a lot easier because you have to deal with that stuff no matter what if you're moving from one location to another. So you have all the systems, everything around you. So you can just focus on those key things. And so rolling into acquisition number 5, I mean, it was always my intent from day one to grow. I'd watch Brian Beers' journey and a few others, and it's like, okay, I'm in the system. I know it's kind of a closed circuit. It's not real easy to come in inside. Everything's going to funnel to me before it goes to anybody else. And so what I did is I just started asking the questions. So we have representatives from the corporation that visit all the stores and work with all the owners, in each geographical area. So my first meeting with our director of sales from corporate, I just asked who's of retirement age in my area and who's looking to get out. And I procured a couple of names, and that day I reached out to them, via email because I could go through the database. I had all their information right in front of me because we use a shared database, and I just started sending emails to these operators that I knew were thinking about getting out, were of age to get out, and had long, businesses that were well established. And that next one, acquisition, was adjacent to the markets that I operated in. Definitely not a well-ran business, but that came with its opportunities from a financial perspective. And then store number 6 was a little bit tighter ran, just the kind of a bad company culture. But those kind of fell right in line. We know once I was in and we just made offers, the first one we paid cash. It was a $100,000 transaction. Oh, go ahead. Will.
Yeah, that first one. So tell us about the business in terms of profile, revenue, and earnings.
Yeah, so it was at the time it was only doing about 600, or not even 600. I'm sorry. At one point in time, it was doing about 650,000 in revenue. When we came across it, it was doing just over $500,000 in revenue and essentially nothing on the bottom line. But we knew, we'd seen its past performance. We knew with our buying power and kind of with the systems we had set up that we could make that store pretty profitable pretty quick. And it was it was only, I think, 7 or 8 years old at that time. I mean, it was established, but still a lot of room to grow. So we bought that, essentially just for the inventory that was on hand.
$100,000 for $100,000 in cash you paid.
Yep.
And getting the inventory, the location, and you thought if you could get it profitable, that what you were seeing in your own businesses was that your average Batteries Plus could do, call it 120. So if you get this thing on the right track, you'll get your money back in a year or two.
Yeah,
and then
correct.
And then in perpetuity, you'll have 120 coming in every year from that store in earnings.
Correct.
Okay, and then number 6, what was the story with number 6?
Yeah, number 6 was another person that I made a contact with right around the same time. Was thinking about getting out, but kind of went back and forth, and so kind of got put on the back burner. We completed acquisition number 5, and that owner thought he could get more money for his business, and it was a much larger store, very stable store. And so he went out and tried to do so, and found out over the course of a couple of months that the numbers that I was talking were more in line with the reality of what was out there. And so he came back after that initial contact, 4 months later, and decided that he wanted to sell. So we negotiated terms there. His store was doing a little over $800,000, which it was netting about $100,000 a year. And we purchased that one for about $300,000. So 3 times SDE. Mm-hmm. And that was all done. I think we put 10% up, and the rest of it was all done via seller note. I think that was a 15-year term, 6% interest rate, and I just went through the SBA process. So I knew I was going to pay 10, 11%. So, and only get a 10-year term. So that one worked out really well and continues to. Amazing.
So you put 10% down. So $30,000, call it.
Yep.
And 90% seller note at a great rate of 6%. Correct. And a great AM of 15 years.
Yep.
Awesome. And by the way, that is something that Brian Beers says that can commonly happen in these businesses, in these franchise systems,
Yep.
these legacy franchise systems, that you can get awesome seller financing. Once you're in, you can get really great seller financing because there aren't a lot of buyers for these.
Well, not only that, I think the other component about that is like there's a little bit more security in doing business with us versus somebody else because we've already been vetted and they know, the situation we have to go through, the whole process we have to go through in order to become a franchisee. And then we have a reputation within the business. So for me, like if I was going to sell, I'd be looking at another franchisee as well, just because I do have some level of reassurance that this person knows what they're doing. And has the ability to pay me back, where I think in any other situation, like you have to build that relationship. Yeah. And in the franchise circuit, I'd say it mostly exists already.
Fantastic. And okay, so let's hear a little bit more about the integration. So you integrate these two businesses in the systems, and that really is pretty seamless. No big deal.
Yep.
But in number 5, you've got to right the ship. So the culture, the business performance needs to be fixed.
Correct.
And number 6, which was a healthy business, still, but from under a different owner, so different culture. So talk a little bit about how you integrated culture, or how you approach that, how you unified these with your existing portfolio of 4. The part that you said was hard, that wasn't just so seamless. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of it came down to the leaders that were not in the stores, going in and identifying kind of where the gaps were and getting. I would say the people were the biggest part of that, both equations. We needed to get the people that were on board out of the business and get people in that at least knew no better into the business, start to kind of change the company culture. And so we systematically did that. We spent time, and my leaders spent time in these stores evaluating associates and leaders in the business to see if they could, really acquire the skills and fit into our company culture. And those that could, we worked on aligning them to the expectations of our business. So our operating policies, the way that we sell, and we had a group of KPIs that we focused in on. And so as we go in, we would focus on training the folks and, really reviewing and discussing our KPIs and our scorecard and why those things mattered and how what they did impacted those numbers. So a lot of it was like an education piece, and then, giving them access to the resources that they'd never had access to. So they really depended on the store manager, which was the owner, where we kind of already had this, shared services group that were really experts in all things Batteries Plus that they could go to. And then we opened that up not only there, like to our communication channels. So now these associates and managers had the opportunity to directly communicate with other store managers in our business, which they'd never been able to do before, and ask questions peer to peer and, collaborate in a work environment that was not just this small, tiny silo, and realize and learn what they needed to do and how they needed to do things from their peers. So they're much more apt to go ask the questions of their peers through the, things like Slack, like we had, which, a lot of these owners don't even know that exist. They were able to kind of ask their peers, what they need to do here and what they need to do there. And then my leaders would kind of come in and enforce that message. And those that wanted to play ball, and really wanted to follow kind of our systematic processes for selling, for how we conduct from an inventory perspective, how we greet customers, because those are all the things like Batteries Plus doesn't really give you. They give you guidelines, but that doesn't mean that's how you show up. We enforced all of those things. And those that wanted to follow the script started making more money. We had bonus programs like where they'd never had them before. They were making a little bit more money. And those that didn't, like we just carved out of the business and brought leaders in and associates in that wanted to kind of be a part of what we were building.
Yep. Yeah. Fascinating. And so you were kind of creating a mini version of for your managers and associates of what a larger franchise system offers, which is this knowledge sharing across locations. And you kind of created that under the Corey Robinson family of locations, with Slack, basically. It sounds like, not to minimize
they had monthly or they had weekly meetings as a team. There are all these different ways where they had the ability to collaborate, and then it offered my leaders, my more senior leaders, the opportunity to set expectation and drive accountability across the entire organization. Like we have 4 numbers that we still focus on to this day. and everybody knows all of the tasks that we complete should be roll up into driving these KPIs. And so my leaders know, like, this is what we're focused in on. And this is what we're going to talk about. And this is the training that you need to do. And this is the education you need to have. And I'm going to hold everybody to the same standard, in which we have a standard. Everybody needs to operate to, this certain level in all of these different KPIs. And I think that structure and that standardization helped us a lot. And that was things like, we had inventory processes that were aligned with Batteries Plus, but a lot of people just don't follow, where we have rigid inventory processes to make sure we're controlling our costs. So doing things like cycle counts every week, and making sure that we're balancing our inventory levels on a normal basis was like something that was completely new to them, because they just kind of, fly by the seat of their pants and just do whatever, or they'd never been exposed to it. So now they have ownership of these different aspects of the business that have created headaches for them in the past. We have a systematic way of attacking them, and a set of SOPs or guidelines on how you should be doing these things. And it's like, for them, it's like, many of them, the light bulb just went off like shit. Like, I never had all this support or all this direction. Like, now I'm clear on how to do my job and what success looks like in my job. And I think most people want that and gravitate towards that. And so what we found is that in many instances, especially in these one-store operations, that doesn't exist, right? That company culture and that system that everybody operates in doesn't exist. And we come in and create that, and most people gravitate towards it.
It's fantastic, Corey. And so I was going to ask later, but I think that this was the answer, that like what sort of the corporate skill, like establishing KPIs, establishing North Stars, some of the structure of a corporate environment, how you get a whole team rowing in the right direction, in the same direction, what some of that looked like. That was this. So everything that we just heard you say was kind of you importing your 20 years of corporate knowledge into this small business environment.
Correct. Yeah. I knew my job coming into this was create a vision, and then what's going to lead to that vision, right? So I knew where we wanted to go. I knew I wanted to be one of the best operators in the system. And so I spent a lot of time like deep diving. What does that really mean? My vision is to be one of the best, top 2 or 3 franchisees in the system. How do I do that? And some of that I knew, and some of that I studied from the other very successful franchisees in the business. And so creating things like core values, and then creating policies that support those core values, and then creating metrics for everybody to get behind. Like, that's, I think for me, having a system is much more important than the system, right? Just creating a system within your business that people can grasp onto is the key. It's not like whose system. People operate on things like EOS and a million different things like it. But I think that the secret is just creating a system and following the system, and you'll be successful. And that's really what's playing off here. It's like I knew how to create the system, and I knew that if we just kind of towed that line and all talked about the same things, focused on the same things, that we would, drive towards them and eventually be successful. And that's what we've seen. It was just really understanding what are those levers that we can pull and focus in on to make us more profitable, to make us more well-recognized within the business.
Wow. Really impressive. And congratulations, Corey. I mean, this is just working so well. You just sound like a super sharp operator. Okay. So here we are at about 70 minutes into this interview. We need to start wrapping up the Batteries Plus part of the story. And I want to give just a few minutes. We're not going to have time to do a deep dive into what you characterized as your arrogance going into just buying other businesses because you were crushing it so hard at Batteries Plus. So we need to give a few minutes to that. It's not all been easy peasy for you. So you went from the 6 that we've heard about. You bought another 6 Batteries Plus, and then you've got 2 more under LOI. So you're on the eve of having 14, starting from 4, getting to 14. And how long?
So my first acquisition was completed in November of 2022. That was the first store purchase. And so we're set to close by the end of August on the 14th. So
less than 2 years.
Yeah, less than 2 years.
Look at that. That's awesome. And where are you, by the way? You
said
I live
Midwest, just outside of Clinton, Iowa. So eastern Iowa, just off the Mississippi.
Okay, great. Anything? So quickly, just bang through the other 6 that you bought. Was it all at once, or was it piecemeal, or what?
No, so it was. So I bought the 5 and 6.
Yep.
And then I bought 7, 8, 9, and 10 in a different area. So I bought those 4 stores in North Dallas market.
Oh,
I closed on those in November. So a year after the first 4-store purchase, I closed on those. And then in December of last year, 2023, I closed on 2 more in the Des Moines, Iowa market. So that pretty much closed out Iowa for me. And then the next 2 stores that we're acquiring are also in the kind of the North Dallas area. So, and we have one territory that we have to develop sometime next year. So it'll be 15 essentially.
When you say closed out Iowa, what does that mean? You bought all the batteries
the
plus in the
territory,
state?
yeah. But I mean, there's like 1 or 2 stores out there still. But I own all the major metropolitan areas in Iowa.
Okay,
essentially.
And anything to say about buying a portfolio of units that you have to fly to get to?
I would say, for me, I worked remote for like 5 or 6 years prior to COVID, so I spent a lot of time in dispersed teams. So I knew that I needed just to buy like a cluster. Like I needed to have a leader over top of the stores. And so I know like if I could buy a cluster in a different market, I would do that. And for me, like Dallas Fort Worth just made a ton of sense. It's slated to be the largest metropolitan area, I don't know, in the next 30 or 40 years. Tons of people moving there, tons of activity. And so when I looked at growth opportunities, they're just organic growth opportunities. And it's very densely populated, especially that North Dallas market. It just made a ton of sense. And for me, from my local small airport, I've got multiple flights to Dallas Fort Worth every day. So I can be there in an hour and a half. I can walk into my airport 5 minutes before I board, be in DFW an hour and a half later and be to one of my stores, 30, 40 minutes after that. So amazing. I can get there actually quicker than some of the stores I can get to, here in the Midwest. So.
Oh, great. And then just remote management of these teams. We've all gotten kind of used to that. So no big deal. Just as long as
great. We're very fortunate to have a really good team and a really good leader down there. And we all kind of fly down, on different times throughout the year to just kind of check on things. And they've really immersed themselves in our culture, and it's really been a great fit. We've been very fortunate with that acquisition in many ways.
So Corey, from your portfolio of Batteries Plus businesses, what is the aggregate revenue? What's the aggregate earnings or EBITDA? So before debt service.
So of the 12, right now will be right somewhere near 10 million in revenue. EBITDA we expect to be about 12%. So 1.15 to 1.2 EBITDA. Cash flow, net after all of that, we're expecting about half of that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, even with debt service? So after debt service, after everything. Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, maybe a little short of that, but I would say 400 to 550,000.
Great. And you wanted to replace, what was it? About 250 was your corporate salary? Great. So did that handily. Looks like you will have doubled that in a couple of years. Huh?
If I stopped buying stuff, it would be great.
Right. Yeah. But you are not going to stop buying stuff.
I'm not.
So tell us quickly about your misadventure into buying an independent plumbing HVAC business.
Yeah. So in September of 2023, we closed on a $4 million HVAC and plumbing business that was doing just short of 700,000 SDE. Really a well-ran business. Going into that, the first few months were great. And we got into HVAC and plumbing because of the real estate portfolio. When I started my search, I really wanted something in home services that could, somewhat integrate into what we're doing in real estate. Because the plan was always to continue to expand that portfolio. And when I looked back at where do we spend money in our real estate portfolio, and what can we not easily bring in house? The HVAC rose to the top. Plumbing would have been second. When something's wrong with the furnace or AC, we always just farm it right out to our, who we partnered with in the HVAC world. And I thought, man, if I'm going to get into this, it just makes a ton of sense. The more research I did about it, the more I realized it's a hot business. It's a hot industry. Everybody's getting into it. The margins are fantastic. And I was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. When I started my search, I couldn't find anything, which I'm very thankful I didn't. And then as I refined it, that kind of went to the wayside. But through that whole process, I made contact with a lot of brokers, and they brought that back to me. It happened to be about an hour from me, And I thought, I know the market. And if my plan is to buy that and to expand back towards home, this makes a ton of sense. It was big enough that I, had some cash flow, would be able to make some money off of it and be able to take that money and go and acquire more. Little did I know that it's much more complicated business. One, I didn't have the framework of a franchise. And two, it's very seasonal. Three, tradespeople are very hard to manage. And four, going from a 1990s era way of operating the business to current, 21st century technology and professionalism is not nearly as easy as I thought it was going to be. So the owner stayed on in that business until the end of the year. So 2023, we rode out, was pretty good. Didn't have any real complaints. I didn't spend a ton of time there. And things kind of went off without a hitch. Beginning of the year, owner vacated his spot, was retired. He was in his 70s, retired, walked away. And I came in thinking I was going to make all these grand changes now that I knew the business a little bit. Little did I know that nobody wanted to deal with those changes. And so I had key staff jumping ship left and right. We switched from pretty much pen and paper way of doing business, which was they had it like down. I mean, completely. They were accounting for every dollar, doing time and material. And we're very profitable at it, but we were going to switch to ServiceTitan. We're going to take everything electronic. We're going to go flat rate. We were going to wear uniforms. We were going to rebrand. We were going to do all of these things. And then the winter of 2024 hit. I'm losing people. And across the industry, things really slowed down. It was a really warm winter in the upper Midwest. And the industry as a whole was just kind of slowing down. Going into election year, there's a million reasons as to why that happened. You talk to any of the major manufacturers, I think they're all down about 20% kind of across the board. And so all of those things just snowballed into a situation where I was there all the time. I was running out of cash, and I was very, very fortunate to have Batteries Plus. I have a real estate portfolio. It's kind of keep me afloat through all those times. And the other part of that was like, I'm there trying to learn the business, trying to settle my people, while I'm panicking because I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. I don't know, how I'm going to make payroll this week without pulling money that I really don't have from my other businesses because I've already started to drain them. My partner and I at the time, we're just trying to find capital to keep things going without really kind of getting to the root of what was going on. And we were fortunate in the way that like people were leaving. So, my most expensive people were leaving, which was very bad, but the same token was good because it definitely lowered our payroll to some effect. But yeah, it was a really nasty process to go through. That J curve was really rough. We cut revenue in about half during those months, and had to go and kind of backpedal. And not only that, we cut revenue in about half. ServiceTitan is very expensive. We had a consultant that was helping implement it. We upped our marketing. We have all these additional expenses kind of going into the business to try to modernize it at a time where we don't have the revenue. We don't really have the skill set. We don't have the leaders that know how to implement this stuff. And I have a lot of other obligations that I was trying to tend to. So I wasn't there nearly as much as I was needed to be. My son switched schools. I had commitments at home that I needed to take. I had commitments, travel commitments that were made all over the place. So everything was just kind of unraveling through that process. And fortunately, I was able, kind of as the year went on, progressed, spring started to come, business started to pick up. I started getting freed of my other obligations, spend more time there. We started to kind of stabilize. We pushed some of the non-critical stuff off and just kind of focused on our implementation of ServiceTitan, kind of doubled down on that. And those that wanted to get with that program continued to stay, found ways that we were wasting money. And then I brought more leaders, like as things started to get better and better, it's like, okay, like I don't want to be the operator. That was never the intent. So I just started hiring more key leaders into the business, even though I couldn't really afford it. I knew like I just needed additional help. And so those, getting those positions in and filled and uncovering some of these really large problems, helped us a lot. So some of the big things that happened through that, like when we switched from paper, like logs essentially and paper invoices into ServiceTitan, The guys in this industry, they essentially get paid for what they bill, right? So if you're a plumber, you're HVAC tech, you bill 8 hours a day, you get paid 8 hours a day. You bill 6 hours a day, you get paid 6 hours a day. And there might be some shop time and some other stuff in there, sprinkled throughout. But now it's like, as we went back and audited, it's like, hey, we're paying like an extra day and a half to every guy that we're not billing out across the entire business. And so we're losing, 20-25% of our revenue, and our payroll is up 20-25% on our labor. The guys were coming into the warehouse, just grabbing parts out of the warehouse, and not billing them on the invoice. So when we finally got our books all settled down from the transition to Service Titan, we realized like our material cost was actually higher than our material revenue. And that's that's what we pay the bills with. And not only that, we had vendors coming in just like supplying our warehouse that I really didn't even know. They just come in, restock stuff, and the guys would take stuff out, and it's like it was just kind of this nasty cycle that we're in. So we stopped that immediately. We put everybody kind of back on paper time cards, and our collections, our AR got out of control. My office staff, with all the changes, was so focused on making sure everything was right that we just kind of forgot about like we need to get money into the business. And so we like really focused on collecting our money. And so since that time, things have gotten much better. Actually, now I'm sitting at home. Most days I wouldn't have been home doing this, but so it was a nasty J curve to go through. It was very steep, very hard. Definitely made me a much better leader in that situation. And I think that, when I think about the last 6 or 8 months of my life and my journey, it's like all of those things, like everything that came before that, like came what I would say fairly easy. And I don't know if arrogance is necessarily the right word, maybe a little ignorant, but I thought, man, I can just like real estate, I can just keep stacking, keep going. And I quickly realized, over the last 6 months, like that's not the way to do it. Running lean on cash, just buying to buy, is not going to make me successful and get me to where I want to be. So I really have like changed my outlook and how I'm going to focus my time, my acquisitions going forward through all of that. And now I know what to watch out for my next acquisition. And I think the biggest component of what I learned is I never wanted to be like the general manager, be there day to day. But I went into this situation thinking like this is one more thing I can add to my plate and go and do. And what I should have done looking back is I should have, before we even closed, I should have hired an operator, because that was always my strategy, rather than thinking like, just another thing I can deal with and manage through. Like the people are the key component to this, and knowing what I wanted and who I am was the other key component to it. It's like I should have just hired somebody at a high level, paid the money, had them come in and oversee the day-to-day operations so I can continue to focus on strategy and growth and getting into some of those, those rabbit holes that a lot of people don't look into, rather than just thinking I could do it all myself and make it all work, because it was not a fun journey, and it cost a lot of capital and a lot of heartache and a lot of nights of lost sleep.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that was really helpful, Corey, that hiring a general manager or operator, would have been the key thing kind of that you did wrong if you had to, or what you would tell your 8-month younger self to do differently. Anything else? What about the kind of like don't make changes for 6 months thing? Did too many changes too quickly? That kind of jumps out at me. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it absolutely does. I knew that going into it, and I tried to, I spent like 4 months without making any real changes, and switching to a system that completely changes how you do your business was probably not where you should start with the change. Making small changes and seeing how the team reacts to those would have been where I should have started, and I should have given it a little bit more time. But I thought like I have an opportunity because, come January, things are slower and the team needs time to train, and like we need time to get everybody on board with this. And so I thought, if I'm going to do it this year in 2024, I need to do it now while we're kind of in a lull. But I didn't understand all the impacts that it would have, and I was ill-equipped to manage through it. So yeah, I think starting slow with your changes and seeing how people react, and ensuring that you have somebody there that can manage the change effectively. Switching to something like Service Type from a paper-based, and then being there 2 days a week and hoping and praying that your consultant is directing your team the right way to follow up on it is not a very good plan.
Okay, so you managing a big change like that really closely and
Yeah.
having your hands on it directly. Well, Corey, despite the fact that you had such a hard time in the HVAC business, so that doesn't sound easy, you've still made remarkable progress in 2-ish years. So in some ways, it feels, I mean, this is going to be really inspiring and energizing to people how much you can accomplish in 2 years. So am I overstating it, or what would you tell people who are watching or listening to this and want to immediately go out and buy some franchise units and get going as you have?
Yeah, I think there's a cautionary tale to it. Like, it doesn't come without a high level of sacrifice. And I wish I had the foresight today that I do today, because it's taken a toll. I mean, personally, I've spent a lot of days, working and from sun up to sundown, many days, probably more often than not. I've had my loved ones at my side working very similar hours. It's been very hard on my family. And I wish that, looking back on it all, it was a fun ride. It's really exciting to be where I'm at today. It's really exciting to have gotten through all that I've put myself into, but it has had its negative impacts on my personal life, on my health, and on my family. And so I would caution people that if you have other outside obligations and you have concerns about that, to not go down this journey. I don't think it's one for everybody. And I would say most people probably shouldn't try to go at this as fast or as quickly as I did, without having, one, the ability to sacrifice, which I really didn't have, and the right skill set. I think there's a lot of things that I was able to bring to the table and a lot of backing that I had that most people don't have. So without those things, without being willing to give so much up and to have a lot of support around you, I don't know that you should jump into this like I did.
And the skill set, of course, is the 20 years of the leadership that you'd had. I think key point here is not that you would forewarn people about this path, but just how quickly you went on the path.
I think it's a great
so you
path.
could have saved yourself some gray hair by just maybe moving a little more slowly.
Yeah, I would definitely caution anybody to getting into, the ETA space. I think it's a great space. I think it's a great opportunity, and I'm very happy to be in it and continue to be in it. Just how quickly I've come at it. I've learned a lot of hard lessons the hard way. And I think that going a little bit slower, being a little bit more thoughtful and methodical in your approach will help a lot, because, there's just a lot of things that had to be learned really quickly at the expense of other things in my life that I didn't know as I went into it. So I definitely want to caution people on that side of it.
And to be clear, the entire project you would characterize that way, or was this just the HVAC nightmare, or batteries plus two? You also felt like you moved a little too quickly.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that I moved too quickly in the batteries plus side. I think it's just everything combined, right? So the HVAC space, jumping into a different industry like that right away, while I was still building and still trying to figure out the batteries plus business, and then taking all the hardships related to the HVAC business, like those are the things that it just all kind of compounded. And when things weren't going right, it seemed like nothing was going right. Instead of having one problem to deal with, I had 3, 4, and 5 problems to deal with. So that's really been the challenge. And splitting your time. You're coming into something new and trying to learn a new industry, trying to learn a new team, trying to figure out how to operate it best and meet customers and do all those things. Doing that with split focus and you being the person responsible for that, it's very challenging.
Yeah.
And so I just don't see where it really makes sense for many to go down that path.
And so what about contrast for us? You've already touched on it, but say more about independent business versus franchise.
Yeah, independent. So, I went from a very simple business with a framework on how to operate it to a pretty complicated business without like a real clearly understood framework on how to operate it. So there's a lot of things. I think that one of the things in independent business that I didn't account for was competition. They are ruthless in this space. In a smaller town, like my competitors at every bend have tried to take my people, have tried to kind of throw us under the bus, kind of talk bad about us to our vendors and to the community, call OSHA on us. Like, I did not expect that coming into this at all. And it's not something that I had to deal with in the franchise space at all. Losing talent, like that was not something that I foreseen either. But the other part, I think the biggest component of that is like what I was able to do in Batteries Plus to create kind of this vision and these systems around this vision was I couldn't do that easily in this independent business because there were so many little things that needed to be shored up that weren't there. Like, Buyers Plus provided tons of policies and procedures, and we were already following a lot of them. So I just kind of built on top of that, where none really existed in this business. Like everything was like, they had a work document on how we pay commission. There's no attendance policy. There's no dress code. There's none of this stuff. And it's like trying to just switch it all overnight didn't work. And so for me, like changing the way that I came at the business was really hard because that's what I was accustomed to at a high level, operating at a high level, coming into this without understanding all the variables and trying to make all these changes and standardize and structure this business. It just was too much, too fast. And, and the other part of this, I think that I learned too, is how relational the business is. The customer base is loyal to you as long as you show up and do what you've done in the past. Your commercial accounts or your commercial customers, it's the same way. Like they had a relationship with the old owner that kind of got them through, and they got special treatment depending on who they were from the old owner that I wasn't aware of, and that I really didn't want to continue to provide. That really has drastically impacted that business as well. Any price changes, anything like that, it's amazing how sensitive some of the community is to things like that, and how much your competition is willing to capitalize on that. I thought that, arrogantly thought coming into this business, like, oh, it's just a bunch of old tradesmen that own these businesses and they're not that savvy or that wise. Why they may not, do Service Titan and be on all these crazy platforms like I am. They're paying attention and they're willing to pounce on any opening that I gave them. And so like, I have to commend them on it. I'm not real happy about it, but it's like, going into this, those are just things I didn't think about or I didn't understand that I wish I would have spent more time learning the relationships and the competition, and the lack of structure in the business before I would have tried to create that. But that was the only way that I knew how to manage too. I'd been doing it for so long that way, and it worked so well in Buyers Plus that I completely had to come at it from a different angle and a much slower approach.
Few quick reactions to all that, Corey. This is just so solid. Thank you. The interesting how you characterize like not having any processes, SOPs or anything in the business, rules in the independent business where you have all of that in the franchise. It's actually analogous to why we like entrepreneurship through acquisition. You're getting so much. So compare 0 to 1 versus buying a business. You get so much when you buy the business. Well, now you could take that, the next level of abstraction is, buying an independent franchise versus an independence, versus an independent business, you get so much with the franchise. Now, I mean, I'm maybe getting too enthusiastic about the franchise option because there are downsides to it. But it sure, your story, at least as a microcosm of this, sure seems, that makes the franchise option seem pretty compelling. On the other hand, let's not forget too that there's a little bit of apples and oranges comparison going on because you bought in two completely different industries, two completely different businesses. And home services has become, I heard it characterized and said on this podcast as a bloodbath in the last year. It's gotten very, very competitive. There's searcher interest, there's private equity interest, there's, everybody is wrapping their vans and upping their, the brand is dialed in. Everybody's putting in Service Titan, trying to optimize their pricing, and just upping their game. And you getting into it in late 23, 24. There are a lot of really hungry, smart, ambitious people in the home service game today. So that really also may be perhaps the biggest thing, kind of the biggest dynamic here of all that you were feeling. So let's not over prescribe franchise versus not as the crux of the story here. But now with some stabilization, how do you feel about this business? How are you feeling optimistic? Are you feeling just relief, or what? How do you look at the next 3 and 5 years in this business?
Yeah, a little bit of both, right? I definitely am feeling some relief, which is fantastic. We got money coming in. We're able to catch up on our bills. I've got an operator in place, leadership team. I've got a stable team now from a tradesman perspective. So I'm definitely feeling relief and a little bit optimistic. We are, so where am I going from here? I am not completely clear on which path is going to bring about the goal. But I am exploring a couple of different paths. We do have an acquisition coming up of another shop or 2 shops that will be completed hopefully next week. I just talked to the bank this morning. They're waiting on one appraisal to come in, and that's being done in-house, which is fantastic. I can avoid the SBA. And those are...
What do you mean shop, Corey?
HVAC shop. Sorry.
Just so another location. Small HVAC business.
Yep. So 2, yeah. So the owner that I'm currently purchasing from has 2 shops, and they're about 45 minutes from my current place of business, and kind of creates a triangle, and it's actually more towards home for me. So I'm kind of working my way back to home. So that's doing, that business is doing, I think 2.4 between the 2, shops in revenue. So smaller for sure. It's doing, about 10% SDE. So he's made it very clear, like he's built a really good business, well-ran business, but just doesn't have the business acumen. So, to get it to where it's kind of the next level and to really optimize the profitability. So we're definitely completing that one. We have opportunities to do some other acquisitions, but we're kind of in a hold phase of figuring out where we are today and what the next steps are. The goal is to be at $50 million in revenue, top line, and maintain that 15% EBITDA, between the plumbing and the HVAC. So now what is, I think, changed in my mind as I look at my big goals is how are we going to get there? All the things, and I'm glad you kind of illustrated all the things that people like me are up against. I'm in a tertiary market, which has helped. But the operators that are a little bit larger in size they're not dumb. They're aware that, like, hey, private equity is flooding, our industry with money and bringing a lot of things that we've tried to hold off for so long, and a lot of money into the industry. And so, competition is getting tougher and tougher. And private equity is showing up in places where I never thought that they would show up. So I'm really kind of at, a crossroads on what to do next. Do I continue to try to go at this by myself, or do I tuck in with a fund and continue to build that way and escalate my path to 50 million while I'll be enriching some private equity fund through that process? There's definitely an opportunity to make this a little bit easier on me, especially from a capital perspective. So that's really that's what's sitting on my mind with that business today is like, what's the right call and what's the right path? Do I, to get to 50 million? I mean, I had a 10-year plan to get there. I could probably get there in 3 or 4 years, if that, with private equity's help. But
Corey, this sounds suspiciously like you're already talking to somebody.
Well, perhaps. I would say I'm talking to somebody, but I would say that the conversations are upcoming. Yes.
Okay. So, sorry, the 50 million goal in revenue at 15% margins is just for your HVAC plumbing? Yep. This is not Batteries Plus.
No, my holdco, I think today is at like 22 million. So yeah, I mean, I could probably in the next few years get to 50 million in the holding company across my portfolio.
Between everything.
Yeah.
Well, I count. Let me just count that really quick. I count 10 million in Batteries Plus. No, that can't be right because you're about to have 16 locations. So if they do, they don't do $1 million.
Yeah, Batteries Plus should account for close to 12.
Right.
HVAC and plumbing should account for
16 and a half.
6 to 7.
6.5.
Yeah, 6.5. And then I have, so one of the other things that I'm working on is kind of partnering with other searchers. As somebody that's been through the process many times and has a large network now and has all the contacts to get these deals done. So I am working on building out a list of potential operators and partnering with them on acquisitions. There's a few different groups that are doing things like this. I'm just doing it more on a more intimate, more one-on-one type basis. I'm not marketing it, but what I'm doing is we completed a pretty large landscaping lawn care business acquisition about a month ago, which I have partial ownership in, but I'm not the operator. I'm kind of more of the consultant helping direct them as they go through. So that part of that business, should get me up and over, in my holding company up and over 20 million.
And are you the sole investor in a deal like that?
Yeah.
Or the anchor or primary investor?
Yeah.
And so you get some significant chunk of the equity and become coach consultant to the searcher.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you think, so sorry, going back to the 50 million number, you think you wanted to get to 50 million in just plumbing HVAC. And when you talk about doing it in a few years, that is with the help of a private equity partner. Not
Correct.
solo.
We had a 10-year,
Yeah.
originally we had a 10-year plan to get to 50 million. And that was all done, in-house by us.
Yeah.
But yeah, with private equity, I expect I could more than cut that in half.
Well, Corey, you're solidly now in kind of capital allocator territory. Quickly kind of moving out of operator and into investor, primarily role, right? Although
Correct.
I don't know, as recently as a few months ago, you were in that HVAC business trying to fix things. So maybe
it's a little bit of both, but yes, I'm trying to. Yeah,
depends on the day. So as a capital allocator, thinking strategically about where to put your resources and your money, your time and your resources. Why not go all in on franchising, which has done so well for you? Why not buy another 30 batteries plus, or find another franchise system that you like? That seems to be where your capital went the furthest. You grew super fast. Why not all in on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think part of the reason today, right now, is I have these assets in the home services space. And it's like, what do we do next with this? And as I look down the road, I'm looking at, my return on equity, right? Essentially, I guess is how I'm looking at it. Batteries Plus don't churn a ton of capital or don't churn a ton of cash flow off of them. Collectively, obviously, there's some pretty good money to be made. But now, as I look down the road and the opportunities to gain, equity, capital, cash flow, I'm thinking about this business just because, one, it's like it's so hot. There's so much money going into it, and it's like, how can I capitalize on the situation that's going on today? And I think that as I look down the road and think, okay, if I were to partner with private equity or sell to a fund, I can continue to do what I really enjoy doing, right? Which is acquiring. I can go find more businesses. I can go underwrite more deals. I can go bring more businesses into mine and continue to grow that. And I can do that pretty much at a pretty quick pace. I've done it pretty quickly myself with almost unlimited funds. I think about how quickly I can do that. And then I think about the payback on all of that time and effort. And so that's really what I'm looking at. Like, how quickly could I grow this business with the help of some capital? And what would be my return on time? And what would be my return on capital, my return on equity at the end of all of this? And as I look at the two different businesses, I know that, the quicker route to a large payday is definitely on the home services side.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Batteries Plus is kind of, you could incrementally stack $100,000 of earnings acquisition by acquisition, which is nice. And you've certainly got that playbook dialed in, but it would be incremental, kind of linear. Whereas you feel like HVAC plumbing, because of the heat, the white hotness of this industry, you feel like there could be a bigger pop sooner.
Yeah, and I think you look at, arbitrage allows me to pretty much buy. I can continue to buy at 2, 3, 4 multiples across these tertiary markets and combine them into something that, is worth 10 times SDE or 15 times SDE. And then you tuck into a fund and, maybe they're looking to exit at 20 times SDE, on a $500 million business. So that's really what I'm looking at. It's the linear growth versus the exponential growth. And it just makes a lot more sense in the home services space.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And so just lastly, you see yourself, of all of this activity over the last 2-ish years, doing deals, finding acquisitions and putting that together is where what sparks joy for you?
It is. Yeah. It's it's the thrill of the deal. And I can probably addict to it.
It seems like you're a good operator too.
Well, I'm an okay operator. Yeah.
Well, right. Maybe the HVAC experience wasn't the quite a feather in your cap, but what you did in your Batteries Plus sure seemed like you were operationally really brought a lot of value.
Yeah. I think that it's funny because I think that I do have those types of skills. But the longer I'm away from corporate America and the longer that I'm away from doing all that day to day, the less that I really want to do it, or I find the discipline to really take that and run with it. And so I was very fortunate, like coming right out of my job and into that, to be able to have the discipline to sit down and create all this stuff and make sure all this stuff happens. Today, it's like, I continue to be kind of a wanderer, right? As an entrepreneur, nobody's really structuring my time or what I do. And I find that I more and more gravitate towards the things that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
And the networking, the acquiring, the chasing the deal, the underwriting the deal, all the analysis that goes into that, partnering with somebody and helping them change their life, is really after completing that, it's really rewarding to see what I was able to do in that situation, how much easier I was able to make it on somebody. Cause the first one, I was lucky to have a big network, but I went at it, I did all the work and everything myself. And I realized my network helped me a lot through that. And I was able to help the next person tremendously by, knowing who to contact, when to contact, what documentation we needed, being able to, do the due diligence ourselves and teach somebody how to look at things. I felt that, is actually probably my favorite acquisition to date. And it's one that's really not even mine, that I'm not even really responsible for. So it's I want to gravitate more towards that side of things and help others kind of get into the space.
And Corey, so you're talking to the right audience. So there are a lot of would-be buyers listening to your voice right now. And if they wanted to work with somebody like you, something of a investor / consultant / coach / mentor even, I know it's deal by deal, but roughly how much of the business do you see yourself owning? Of their business, do you see yourself owning?
Yeah, so I want to stay under recourse. I don't, and so I don't want to sign documents. I don't want to be liable. I'm a little bit of a control freak. So if I'm going to sign on the dotted line, I want control of that asset. And I want everybody that goes into this, feel like it's their business. I'm just really there to support and, part of the payment to me and part of my continuance of support and help comes from me being vested in the business's interest. Even if, we don't necessarily get along or whatever, I'm still gonna have a vested interest. So yeah, staying under any recourse or any signing. So under that 20%.
20%
where I'm at.
Yeah. Great. All right. Corey, great interview. Wonderful, interesting story. Moving quickly here in the last 2 or 3 years. Been an eventful couple of years for you. And I think it's going to inspire people. If somebody wants to reach out, how do you recommend they do that?
Yeah, I need to get better with my social media, but LinkedIn and Facebook are probably the two that I'm most active on. So it's just Corey.Robinson83, I think, on Instagram, and then Corey Robinson, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So
Facebook and Instagram are a fair place to hit you up?
Yep.
It's not too personal?
Nope.
Okay, cool. Well, everyone, Corey is, if you do reach out to him, as always, make sure you do your homework. He's very busy, as we gathered from this interview. So treat his time respectfully if you do choose to reach out. And I thank you, Corey, for giving me so much of your time. Really a great interview and a fun story. Much obliged.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for the time, and thank you for everything you do for our community. Before you, there's a lot of people that have come up since then, but the platform that we all have because of you is very much needed and a great resource for all of us.
Oh, appreciate that, Corey. Really cool. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.